Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle. Me. In my series Freemasonry and Satanism. And lordy, is the story getting interesting. We'll be doing a new book. Crazy material in this book. Guide to Zionism. Jessie E Sampter. There's a note in here about some Hebrew school and a Hebrew teacher. And the book was published in 1920. So what are you going to believe? What happened in 1920 and before that? Some pretty relevant activity concerning the United States, England, Germany, Federal Reserve, communism, Zionism, and elected leaders controlled by Illuminati Zionist Jewish types. It's all verifiable. What is the story about World War I? What was the aim? What was the result? If you remember, in 1913, December 21st, Christmas time, a special meeting was held in Jekyll Island, Georgia, USA. And the establishment of the agreement for the Federal Reserve took place, which wasn't federal. The Rothschilds and other elitists were taking control of the USA money supply. No small thing. In cahoots with President Woodrow Wilson, who apparently was under the control of the Jewish elites. This is pretty much common knowledge. The previous president wouldn't cooperate with the Jewish elite, so they said, okay, well the next president will cooperate because we'll put him in there. Woodrow Wilson. And he regretted it later on. In some of his material biography. So he helped them create the Federal Reserve, controlling America's money supply, December 2013. Now here's the bomb. 6 months later, 1914. I said 1913 earlier, didn't I? So 1914, 6 months later, World War I started. And so they got a person as a U.S. president they controlled. These communist, elitist Jewish people and others, Zionist, communist, Zionist, same players, and they controlled the Masonic lodges and other secret society establishments, Council of Foreign Relations, Club of Rome, World Congresses for Zionism, organizations all over the country and over in Europe for communism. Communism, get it? Commune. People living like cattle. So we know that they controlled the Federal Reserve. They established that December 2013. 6 months later, World War I started. And all kinds of activity was going on behind the scenes for Zionism to establish the state of Israel in Palestine. And it had been happening for quite a while before that. A lot of Jews were fleeing from Russia because of the controlling mechanisms, the programs they called them. I guess there were some strict and harsh rules for the Jewish people. Why? Apparently, the Jewish people for the last couple thousand years would not assimilate with the rest of us. And it's in this book. Everybody agrees that that was a problem. No matter where they went, they could not assimilate. They have a type of a culture, a religion, and a way of life that is not conducive to them to live with other peoples anywhere. Troubles even in the United States. Exiled from Spain, exiled from Britain, and many other countries over the last couple thousand years. Why? And now we're on the verge, if it's not already happened, that the Jewish people, the communists, the Illuminati, Rothschild banksters controlling the money, much of the wealth of the world, the Zionists, like even Prime Minister Sharon of Israel said in his Congress during a heated argument, "Don't worry about the USA. We control the USA." And all the craziness going on in Europe, and 911 involving apparently Mossad or other Jewish agents. Even caught videotaping 911, jumping up and down and celebrating. Some lady in New Jersey looked out her window, saw it, and called the police. So there's a lot of evidence to support that this inside job apparently involved the Israelis, whether it's communism, Zionism, secret societies, which seems to be all one and the same, part of the pyramid. But let me read the book. Just give you a little synopsis. But wait till you see the material in this book. From the Maccabean magazine, March 1919. We laid our claims before the Council of Ten. On the 27th day of Adar Rishon, 5679, that's a Jewish calendar date, which is the same as on the Freemasonic lodges on the cornerstones. They have a cornerstone, a big L, on the building, and on one side of the cornerstone it'll have the current calendar we all use, 2017, and the other one will have the Jewish date, which can be 5679. Just an interesting coincidence. Yeah, right. That the Masonic temples have the Jewish calendar date on one side of the stone and the calendar referencing Jesus' birth on the other side of the stone. No connection there. Which will remain the most important day in the annals of our history since our dispersion. So they talk about in this book, Guide to Zionism, about the 100 years of the Jewish dispersion. So when they were dispersed from Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, around when Jesus was born, and they had some troubles before that. So they were a people without a country, scattered throughout the world. Such is the opening sentence of the message to the Zionist conference in London, signed by 3 Zionist diplomatic representatives, Wiseman, Schlachlow, and Yushkakin. The Zionist conference in London opened on Tuesday, February 24th, 1919, with representatives from the Allies, the neutral countries, and a special delegation from Palestine. So World War I had ended in 1919. 1917, the Russian Revolution had started. So the Bolshevik Jews were in control of Russia. So now they're having a Zionist conference a couple years later in London. The first report of what took place at this conference reflected a certain amount of dissatisfaction in a number of the delegates with what they considered the modesty of the claims of the Zionist diplomatic representatives in Paris. Then came the appearance before the Supreme Council of these Zionist representatives, the results of which were hailed with great satisfaction. The Zionist delegation consisted of Dr. Weizmann, Nuhan Shakov, M.M. Yusenskin, Andre Speyer, Professor Sylvan Levi, also appeared, but not as a member of the Zionist delegation. In a powerful speech which lasted only 6 minutes, Nuhan Shakov laid before the world's representatives the picture of the 20 centuries of wandering of the Jewish people. Did you hear me? So here they are after World War I, a couple years after they invaded Russia, killed the Tsar, abducted his family. They're talking about the 20 centuries, 2,000 years, of the wandering of the Jewish people. Weizmann followed, and in a speech of equal length, emphasized the point that the war had left the Jews in a more precarious plight than any other people. Yushkakin addressed the council as a representative of the Ukrainian Jews. Remember, the Ukrainian president was ousted, organized by the New World Order folks. And then days after that, I think they shipped out 35 tons of gold from Ukraine to New York. Stuff that goes on behind the scenes. He spoke in Hebrew. He thus demonstrated to the powers of the world that a Hebrew is a living language. A discordant note was introduced by Professor Sylvan Levi, who spoke as a representative of the French Jews, and after paying tribute to the achievements of the Zionists in Palestine, proceeded to belittle the larger claims of Zionism and cast reflections on the character of the East European Jews. I believe the East European Jews are the Khazars, the kingdom 1,000 years earlier that had converted to Judaism, so they're not Hebrew. They're not Semitic. They're barbarian northern Eastern Europeans. Had a propensity back then to be very barbaric, ruthless people. Now they're all Jewish. Of course, in Revelation 9 it says, Jews who call yourselves Jews but are not. So what's going on? This all seems to be a little biblical here. Anyways, he was the last speaker officially, but fortunately his speech was not permitted to create the final impression. Secretary Lansing took the initiative by asking Weizmann a question, to give him the opportunity to speak again, and remove the painful impressions which Professor Levi's speech had created. So the Zionist conference in London in 1919 was talking about world plans, creating the state of Israel in the Palestinian territory, way before it was established in 1947, after World War II. They were already moving there. Those Palestinian people never had a chance. The plans were well in play for over 100 years, as we shall see here. No opposition was advanced by any of the nations represented in the council to the claims of the Zionists. No opposition was advanced by any of the nations representing in the council to the claims of the Zionists. Mr. Balfour, remember they had a Balfour Agreement? Britain was losing World War I, and the elite Jewish people had a brainstorm and went to Britain and said, hey, you don't have to surrender. Germany had offered very agreeable terms of surrender. Just let bygones be bygones. I've made videos on this material. But they said, you don't have to lose the war. We'll get you the money, and we control President Woodrow Wilson. They just said they were going to get the United States in the war on their side, and that'll turn the tide, and you'll win the war. In exchange, you support our annexing the Palestinians' land to create the State of Israel. So they were playing with somebody else's land, the Palestinian people's land, to make that deal. Mr. Balfour took occasion to congratulate the Zionist representatives on the results that they had achieved. And M. André Tardieu, representative of the French government, made the following statement. You don't think all this stuff is planned? Listen up. There is not a slightest difference of opinion among the great powers on the establishment of a Zionist state, nor on giving Great Britain the mandatory. Well, I beg to differ here, because I can tell you right now, like in the United States and probably most of the world, we the people, the citizens, had no say in any of this. The elites were in control of our governments. They come from the secret societies. To the record of these reiterations, of assurances from the powers, should be added the statement made by President Wilson to the delegation of the American Jewish Congress. So here's President of the United States addressing the American Jewish Congress. So I guess we don't have just a United States Congress in Washington, D.C. We have an established American Jewish Congress in this country. That's odd. Just goes to show how much power they yield. And I believe they had a strong hand in World War I and World War II. And the purposes are what has happened, the results of World War I and World War II, was the purpose. It was all planned, like 9/11. I have before this expressed my personal approval of the declaration of the British government, President Wilson, USA, regarding the aspirations and historic claims of the Jewish people in regard to Palestine. I am, moreover, persuaded that the Allied nations, with the fullest concurrence of our own government and people, are agreed that in Palestine shall be laid the foundations of a Jewish commonwealth. I think it was Baruch was a Jewish advisor to President Wilson. In Henry Ford's book, it is claimed that he was the most powerful man in the USA, handling a lot of the details for World War I. And during the World War, there's martial law in the country. People ration supplies, tires, gas, and Baruch controlled it for the president. The elite Jews back then controlled completely the USA, so it seems. I remember a couple of years earlier, or during the war, 1913, during Christmas time, they took over the USA money supply. So yeah, these people that are involved with communism, involved with Zionism, involved with all the secret societies, the organizations that where our elected leaders come from, and other elites who control things. So yes, there were definitely insiders playing their own game to the ignorance of the USA masses of people. We the people were left out of the loop. Not a need to know. Moving on, there should also be a letter from Emir Faisal, heir appointment to the throne of Hejaz, to Professor Felix Frankfurter, one of the Zionist representatives in Paris, wherein the prince set at rest all doubts as to the position of the Arabian people in the following statement. So this Emir Faisal, heir apparent to the throne of Hejaz, not quite sure where that is. I guess he's speaking for all of the Arab people in the whole region. 12 countries. We Arabs look with the deepest sympathy on the Zionist movement. Our deputation in Paris is fully acquainted with the proposals submitted by the Zionists to the peace conference and regards them as moderate and proper. We will do our best to help them through and wish the Jews a most hearty welcome home. So after World War I, wishing the Jews a most hearty welcome home. Stuff's been going on a while. It's going on now, 2017, June. In the interview Dr. Weizmann gave to the press after the appearance of the Zionist delegation before the Council of Ten, he stated, "We have obtained full recognition of the historic title of the Jewish people in Palestine and of the Jewish right to constitute a national home there. The claims of the Zionist delegates, as they are briefly communicated in the official communication to the London Zionist Conference," so they had the American Zionist Congress, now they got a London Zionist Conference, contain everything that may now be demanded. Full recognition of our historic claims in Palestine. The assurance of an independent Jewish commonwealth as soon as the Jews in Palestine will constitute a majority. So they were importing more citizens, more Jews into Palestine in the goal of obtaining a majority in the population. And then they were going to create the independent Jewish commonwealth. Again, 1919, even up for the previous 100 years, they have been working, moving people there, buying up properties. This was all planned, and you're going to find out as I keep reading, it's part of a biblical thing for the Jews to take over leadership of the world. The New World Order, the New Age. So as soon as it constitutes a majority of the population and will be able to dispense with their mandatory the creation of such conditions under the trusteeship of England as will fulfill the desire of Jewish development in Palestine as soon as possible. The recognition as one of the principal conditions of the Jewish Council, which is to have from the beginnings a voice in the administration of the country and receive all necessary concessions to further the development of Jewish immigration on a large scale. That's what it says here. Some people don't think it's all intentional why they had 9/11 and overthrowing all those other Arab countries, bombing all the properties and killing masses of amounts of Arabs, and whoever is left alive they're shipping into Europe and the United States and the world. So they're moving the Arabs out of the Middle East. So it seems. And if you go look up on Yahoo image site and looked up bombed buildings, it's just a horrible situation. And each picture has a link and tells you the story. Amazing material. It's not after they're not after some terrorists. They're destroying all the villages and towns and cities and water facilities, sewer facilities, agriculture. Building a Jewish national homeland. Back in 1919, after World War I, and before. To further the development of Jewish immigration on a large scale, the immediate recognition of the Hebrew language and the Jewish Sabbath and holidays. So they're forcing the Jewish religion to be recognized by the state. I think the Jewish Sabbath is on Saturday. And finally, the determination of the boundaries of Palestine as they were in the reign of King Solomon. So the boundaries will be what they were back in King Solomon's day. And that included a lot of Lebanon, a lot of Jordan, a lot of Syria, all the way to the south. You see the plan here? From the Lebanon in the north to the boundary of Egypt and to the port of Aqaba in the south, and to the east, the whole of the Transjordania, get it? As far as the Heljaz Railroad, which includes the Bashan and Gilead. So they're even having the boundaries laid out here. I don't see anything left over for the Palestinian people. The London Conference, to whom the Zionist delegates reported the success of their mission, received this report with a remarkable demonstration. The delegates rose from their seats and pronounced the benediction. Who hath permitted us to live, preserved us until this season. All parties expressed satisfaction and confidence in the delegates. So they're praising a God that, and this is the benediction, who had permitted us to live and preserved us until this season. Wow. I'm not going in sequence in this book. I'm jumping around, so I was further ahead. Now I'm going back to the beginning. And it certainly looks like I could make a couple videos of this material. It's so important that people realize World War I, World War II, so much more has been planned and controlled by certain peoples of the world. And the creation of the secret societies, many of them, where they even swear under threat of death having their throat cut, like the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. And then also those Masonic organizations and other cults, Rosicrucian, whatever, are involved or supporting the rebuilding of King Solomon's temple, which was the boundary lines for these Zionists. In the previous video I made, 130, was on communism, and I'll make another one on that material, and we're going to see that these things come together. The Masonic organizations, secret societies, apparently are Luciferic, and they're controlled by the Zionist and communist. I'm suspecting that they're Luciferic also, because it's the Kabbalistic material out of the Kabbalah. I've read a lot of it, and in Morals and Dogma, we'll take a look at that. It's not a question. It's just a question of, do people want to be aware? So what I did is I went to Morals and Dogma. And you can see this here. The Morals and Dogma is like the Bible for the Freemasons. So it says here on page 172 in the index, Solomon Lodge represents the temple of the king, represented by a lion, the Holy Empire symbolized, double triangle explained by St. John. We've seen the double triangle in the New Age material. Solomon's philosophy, the basis on which Masonry is founded. That's what it says here. I'm going to show you. Solomon's star, formed by the meeting of the lines of the compass and science with those of the triangle, So a six-pointed star, which is on the Israeli flag. Solomon's Temple, a symbol of the 9th and 10th Sephiroth. That's in the Kabbalah and Hermetic material. If you want to understand it clearly, just think of it as witchcraft. Some kind of different kinds of powers, gematria or numerology, and other philosophies, like androgynous beings, like Baal or the devil is half man, half woman, female. Solomon's Temple, after the model of Ezekiel, to be rebuilt by the Templars. Solomon's Temple, ground floor of Solomon's Temple, rebuilt, the secret dream of the patriots of the Orient. Solomon's Temple rebuilt will give Constantinople the Romish power. Solomon's throne, like that of the Egyptian Horiat. So when I went over the Book of Law with Aleister Crowley's material, there was a lot of Egyptian hieroglyphics, and I believe this guy's name, Horoeri, was in there. So look up where it says here, Solomon's philosophy, the basis of which Masonry is founded. Where my finger is. There went my phone. So when I say the Masonic organizations and other secret societies appear to have a common denominator, the Kabbalistic material, Hermetic material, the Sephirot, Helena Blavatsky's secret doctrine, who formed the Lucifer Publishing Company and Lucifer Magazine, Albert Pike, Manly Hall, leaders of the Freemasons, have said that Lucifer was their deity. So if they are all the same, and this is what communist is, Zionist is, the new state of Israel is, and the secret societies all over the world where most of our politicians and leaders come from, they have to prove themselves. Even like George Bush and the Skull and Bones, also known as the Brotherhood of Death. So if that's true, then we can say the Zionists, the communists, and all the secret societies are part of the Brotherhood of Death. So I'm going to go to the beginning of this book now. And a guide for the student of Zionism. Pay attention to what I read here. See if it doesn't raise your eyebrows. You go, huh, I didn't know that. Huh, I didn't know that either. The Jews are a people with a continuous and recorded history of more than 3,000 years. This people numbers today nearly 14 million souls. Remember, this book was written in 1920. This people numbers today nearly 14 million souls. The greater part of this dispersed people, so you got 14 million dispersed people, is living in national concentration within a number of countries and in distinct and the self-contained communities that are kept separate by the inner pressure of a particular way of life or a particular emotional character, both preserved to the greater or less extent by religious sanction and frequently by outer pressure of prejudice and special legislation. So the 14 million souls are all over the world. They live separate from everybody else. The millions of Jews in the world are descendants of the nation of Palestine that was conquered and that was dispersed 2,000 years ago. Well, a lot of us know now that that's not true. A lot of the Ashkenazi Jews are from the Khazarian Empire around the Ukraine, Poland, Russia. 1,000 years ago, the whole nation converted to Judaism. Remember in the Bible, Revelation 9, it says Jews who call themselves Jews but are not. They are as distinct a national element as the Belgian or Polish people. So I disagree. A lot of them are not even Hebrew, which are called Sephardic. They're Ashkenazi, which means they're Northern European. Since they have preserved their national individuality, no one can point to a moment in time at which the Jewish people lost their national character. So again, they kept their national character, and in the Encyclopedia Judaica, it says the culture, historically, of the Jews was the Kabbalah. I've made videos on that. Read right from the Encyclopedia Judaica. Besides a purity of race, so are these people a race of people? Obviously, the Hebrews from the Middle East can't be of the same race as the Khazarians. Because of the purity of race as great as that of any nation living on its own soil, the Jewish people has also preserved at least 4 of the chief factors of national life, namely laws, customs, history, and language. So something's wrong with the customs and the laws because in their history they've had troubles wherever they went. A 5th national factor, religion, has been the means of preserving the other 4. So what religion do they have? Religion has therefore been the chief national asset of the Jew. So the religion has been the chief national asset of the Jew. I'm speculating here. If they are Luciferic, not worshiping God, but the fallen angels, whatever, and they have the Kabbalah, they were into that, and they were accused of sorcery and other kinds of things, sacrificing humans. They're practicing witchcraft. Would that cause the problem? I'm speculating and I'm reading. And I've gone over enough material to ask these questions. Certain portions of the Jewish people have lost national will and energy, and it is this fact that has led to the use of the word race instead of nation, and of people to designate the Jews. Now I must make it clear, like in any society, like in America if you're Christian, just because you're Christian doesn't necessarily mean you're a good person. A lot of people in those mafia movies, after they do a hit on somebody, they do the cross sign, and I'm always looking at the movie going, he's crazy. God's not going to bless him. He's a hitman. So the same thing with the Jewish people. I've got many books written by Jewish people who are exposing this Zionist program, which apparently is in cahoots with the communist program, which are the forces of the pyramid, the Illuminati, that control the secret societies. Okay? So a lot of good Jewish people, Orthodox, who believe in the 10 Commandments and not stealing and killing and trying to take over the world, like this Rabbi Marvin Antelman, the leader of the Jewish Congress for the United States of America. No small thing. So I just thought I'd flip open to one thing here to tell you what we're dealing with. March 1996. I could give you many examples out of these 2 books. I made some videos, series 45. But here's what I'm going to read. The Resolution on Gay and Lesbian Marriage, adopted at the 107th Annual Convention of the Central Conference of American Rabbis. March 1996. Background. Consistent with our Jewish commitment to the fundamental principle that we are all created in the divine image, the Reform movement has been in the vanguard of the support for a full recognition of equality for the lesbians and gays in society. In 1977, the CCAR, Central Conference of American Rabbis, adopted a resolution encouraging legislation which would decriminalize homosexual acts between consenting adults and prohibits discrimination against them as persons, followed by its adoption in 1990 of a substantial position paper on homosexuality and the Rabbinic. Then in 1933, the Union of American Hebrew Congregations observed that the committed lesbian and gay couples are denied the benefits routinely accorded to married homosexual couples. So like Prime Minister Sharon of Israel said, don't worry about the USA, we control the USA. And we can see with the Central Conference of American Rabbis what they support and how much power they wield. The UHC resolved that full equality under the law for lesbian and gay people requires legal recognition of lesbian and gay relationships. There's much more in these books. I would encourage anybody to get it, but he tells that there are factions of the Jewish society that they're the ones who even started the swingers, the Jews who came to America during the 20s and 30s, created or took control of the porn industry. And by the way, from early 1800s up to 1900 and plus, in Germany they had accomplished the same thing. They had created a really sinister porn industry and other kinds of decadent realities. So when I say I wonder who their God is, because I'm pretty confident the Christian God and Jesus and all that would not be behind all this other stuff. But the satanic Lucifer God would. So that's where I get my idea that I say, well, maybe this is the case. And the symbols for these secret societies and all that stuff, and all the rituals we see on Emmys and Grammys and Super Bowl halftime shows, and in Swiss Alps, the opening for that train tunnel, the completely satanic show there, even with people with horns coming down, and the songs and the languages we've been listening to and stuff on TV. Eurovision with Conchita Wurst winning. Face like Jesus in a dress. You can't make this stuff up. So who controls the entertainment industry? Do I really have to say? They got a sideways cross on this heart. And Zion is the last four letters. If you pay attention and look, you're going to find the clues are just abundant. So back to this, a guide for the student on Zionism. Who are the Zionists? And it says here, religion has therefore been the chief national asset of the Jew. And over here we read that the Zionist conference were way early before Americans were even on the bandwagon of having these discussions back in 77 and 94. They were promoting the acceptance of homosexuality and other decadent activities, even in the TV programming and movies. We have been infiltrated, our whole world. And apparently, if you keep listening to this video, when I read from this material, religion has therefore been the chief national asset of the Jew. They've acknowledged so far that they've been dispersed all over the world for a couple thousand years, and that they can't assimilate because of cultural problems. What problems? All right, So it is a degrading term, for it implies that the Jews have kept the body but lost the soul of nationalism. The modern anti-Semitism, so you might want to call it, if it's certain people performing satanic stuff, instead of anti-Semitism, maybe it's anti-Satanism. And if anybody's going to ask me if I'm anti-Satanism, I will say absolutely yes. I will never swear allegiance to Lucifer. And apparently, according to prophecy, whenever they do whatever they're going to do to create this new age and new world order, if you don't, they're going to behead you, and the people who do will probably be microchipped. There is this new world coming, so it seems. So the modern anti-Semitism of Western Europe is a direct outcome of the weakening of the national will, for anti-Semitism is not national or religious hatred, but rather race hatred. So I'm still trying to find out what race they are. We got Ashkenazis that are white, and we have Sephardic, which are brown, Hebrew. And the people up there in the Khazarian area, I mean, that would include Poles and Romanians and lots of people that were white Northern Europe, East and West. But did they really adopt a religion that's satanic? Is this the whole problem? The older Jew hatred and persecutions were directed against the Jews' efforts to retain his individuality. Now remember, I'm reading from their book, and that's why I do book reviews this way, so that you can see the exact words. This is 1920. Look what's happened since. Whether the Jews attempted to preserve their national individuality or to destroy it, they meet the opposition accorded to aliens. So for some reason, wherever the Jews went, they were treated like aliens. And many of the countries they went to wanted them to assimilate. But it just couldn't happen, or it just wouldn't happen. And of course, the big question is, why? What do the Kabbalistic people practice? And it does say in the Encyclopedia Judaica that historically the Kabbalah was part of the culture of the Jewish people. Is that what their religion is? The name Jews is the designation for a certain people conquered and driven from their homeland. So the Jews all over the world are united. Some of them are opposed to Zionism, communism, and the secret societies. They've written books, they've protested. You can go on Yahoo image site, see the Jews with the curly hair and the hats, Orthodox Jews, praying, God-believing Jews, with big banners. And of course, I've got several books. I've made videos on them. I have other books. We'll be continuing to do this. Speaking of that, I'll just show you another book. Author Kussler, The 13th Tribe. I've already made a video on this. Number 110. This book traces the history of the ancient Khazars Empire, a major but almost forgotten power in Eastern Europe, which in the Dark Ages became converted to Judaism. Khazarian was finally wiped out by the forces of Genghis Khan, but evidence indicates that the Khazars themselves migrated to Poland and formed the cradle of Western Jewry. So they weren't Hebrews. I already made a video on that. Go watch 110. I found another book in my library. Here's where their country was. The Jews of Khazaria. And you can see it's right where the Ukraine is, and next to Russia and Greece and Hungary, Slavs, Bulgaria, Persia, Iran would be over here. So I've got more to read. And I've made a video on this book, 69. Barely touched the surface on this. The Bloody Zion. Edward Hendry, a well-respected author. So when I'm making this video and anybody wants to say, Rick, you're anti-this or anti-that, they're going to be bizarre, because I know what the leader of the Jewish Congress, Rabbi Marvin Entelman, said, and I believe him. He was trying to warn us. All those people on Yahoo Image site, if you look up Zionism, are trying to warn us, and so many others. Henry Macau, PhD Jewish author in Canada. He wrote the book Illuminati, the Cult that Hijacked the World. And I believe recently he just came out with another book. So we can see what's going on in our world. We've got to ask who, what, and why. And I think the stuff in the Guide to Zionism is explaining a little bit of that. There is a religion, as it says right here on page 4, religion has therefore been the chief national asset of the Jew. Well, why would they write a book? This is by an American intelligence officer, retired, Robert Williams, The Ultimate World Order, as pictured in the Jewish Utopia, a book. So Robert Williams discovered a book in a Texas library called The Jewish Utopia. I got a picture here. I made videos on it. I think I made 3 2-hour videos. So please go watch it and be completely amazed. Just trying to find the cover of this book here to show you. This was in the Texas library. The Jewish Utopia. So that was written in 1932, it says on the bottom here. This Guide to Zionism was 1920. So 12 years later, you got a professor writing how they're going to take over the world and how they're going to treat us non-Jews. It's quite horrific. Series number 67. 3 2-hour videos quoting stuff from the Jewish Utopia. Robert Williams was a retired USA intelligence officer. Had his own newsletter magazine he was publishing after he retired. And he found that book. So when I say some of the things I'm saying, you know, we're up to 131 on this series. And I've calculated approximately, I have 500 hours of video material on YouTube. And it has been quite a job. So if you go to my website, rickmiracle.com, you'll see on the top left a link to a list of all the video series I've made. So you can cut and paste and make a cheat sheet and go through it and watch the ones you want to in the sequence you want to, and also have a reference sheet so if you need to go back and see it, because I quote from these books. Series number 45. I'm going to make more videos on these books. Henry Ford, the automaker, I made videos on his. Series 95. Series 71. I'm trying to get to the bottom of this. So I will say that there are Jewish people who have resisted and fought this communist program, political action all over the world, the Zionist program influencing congressmen, representatives, presidents, and other people, crowdfunding, using emotions, and bringing about World War I and World War II for some end result. And what can we say? We're going to say the Luciferians, the Satanists are going to win, which is part of the prophecy that the Antichrist will come before Jesus returns. Crazy, you think? But as crazy as it is, it appears to be very real. And if you want to know what's going on, this seems to be it. After me making almost 500 hours of video material and spending, this is my 13th year, I didn't really want to write any books, or I never knew I was going to make videos. Who would have ever thunk I would have got my face in front of a camera? But one day I decided that I would just do it. It's funny to go back and watch series number 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 when I first started and never had done it before. I laugh at myself. You can still laugh at me now, some people probably do. That's okay. There's a couple things I'll read from the Bible, the Gospel of St. John, that just blows me away. I made that recently, part 5 and part 6. Go watch those 2 videos, 1.5 hours each. Series number 72. The stuff it says in there matches this stuff. Even one thing it says in there, Jesus says, if they hate you, just remember, they hated me first. So 2,000 years when the particular Jewish Pharisees and people involved rejected Jesus' teaching, and one of the pieces of his teaching, he said there was an added commandment from God. And it's a horrible commandment, let me tell you. It says, you are to love one another. He didn't want people killing each other, treating people like they were beggars or stealing their resources. He wanted humanity to love one another. And I'm sure some people will start screaming, no, we can't do that. We need to kill all the Arabs. We need to put up a fence and keep out all the Mexicans. Germany must perish. Assad, the president of Syria, must die. And then Iran must perish. They're planning, so it's in the news a lot, a possibility of a nuclear war. China or Russia against the USA. They want to depopulate the planet. Do I need to really go on? And I keep reminding myself, Prime Minister Sharon of Israel, in a heated argument in his Congress, he said, don't worry about the USA. We control the USA. And I believe they control much of the world. Like in 1913, when they created the Federal Reserve, taking over control of the USA money supply. And the only way they could do that is they were controlling our politicians. And they financed and put Woodrow Wilson in there. And all these presidents and people are generally from the Freemasonic lodges. 32, 33 degrees and stuff like that. So they have their little farm to farm for these politicians and leaders of our world from these secret society institutions all over the United States and all over the world. They even created a New Age magazine I've shown before. Back to this book. The name of their national religion, Judaism. So what is Judaism? Is derived from their national designation. An unreligious Jew is still a Jew, and he can with difficulty escape his allegiance only by repudiating the name of Jew. In some countries, the Jews are despised as a subject people without civil rights. But even in many of the countries where they are emancipated and legally accepted as citizens, they are still looked upon as aliens with special privileges. I'm sure most people like you or me, we're all not running around looking at down the street and up the sidewalk trying to I spy who's a Jew. Most of us accept everybody. I wouldn't even be talking about this stuff now if it weren't for the fact I was researching it, and my research, the path, led me to this material and to some of the conclusions I say. And I'm pleased if people can find some fault with what I'm saying. Show me the book, show me the material, show me where this is not a legitimate book and a legitimate author. The Encyclopedia Judaica I've been going over. Tell me that's not a legitimate source of material. The leader of the Jewish Congress in the United States. All this other stuff. This Secret Service intelligence officer who retires. The ultimate world order. Are you going to trust Robert Williams in finding that book in a Texas library and writing a book about the pages and the material that he read. The Protocols of Zion. Jack Bernstein, the American Jew who moved to Israel, found out the truth about Ashkenazis and Sephardic Jews. The Ashkenazis, the Khazarian type people, are the higher echelon of society, and they look down on the actual Hebrew Sephardic, second-class citizens. So the real Jews are treated as second-class citizens by the Ashkenazi, Khazarian type Jews. Who would have thunk that? Alright, in some countries the Jews are despised as a subject people without civil rights. And remember, this is all pro-Jew material in this book. So when I'm reading things, I just have to remember whoever's going to be at fault is not going to be the Jews. It's like the Encyclopedia Judaica. When I read it and they paint the Jews in the limelight with a halo on their head and godlike, yeah, right. Some of them are. Rabbi Marvin Antelman, Henry McCow, and many other Jewish people. Famous speeches by Jewish people in history. I'll be going over this stuff. Warning us. Jesus was a Jew. I believe Jesus was the Messiah sent by God. So I believe in a Jewish man with the spirit of the Holy Ghost in him, of God. And he said, it's not me. It's he who sent me, God. And whoever prays to God in my name, his prayers shall be answered. Go to watch my 2 videos, series number 72, part 5 and part 6, and watch the other ones. There's quite a few hours there. I'll be finishing the entire New Testament eventually. All right. They are always a special economic problem. The Jews. That's what it says here in their book. So they're telling whoever's reading this book, young Jewish people, or people who are not aware of Zionism, that, wherever the Jews went, they are always a special economic problem. Envied when too successful, because they are not actually the people of the land. Any unusual situation reveals their detachment, such as war, for instance, which causes them to be specially praised for a loyalty that is taken for granted within a nation. Though in certain places, the Jews may be highly valued, though in certain places and ages in history, the Jews may be highly valued as individuals and in small communities. A very large immigration always meets with a partially justified resistance. Well, you think so? Just like they're importing Arabs all over the United States and the world and Europe. And is it meeting with justifiable resistance? Yes, but who's controlling it? It is the secret society and their controlled politicians and the communists and the Zionists. And don't let anybody laugh at you when you mention that stuff. I've been reading out of the Encyclopedia Judaica verbatim what it says. Guess I got to look up Zionism, if I haven't already done that, on the Judaica Encyclopedia. Too large an immigration may constitute almost an invasion. I agree with that. Too many people from Mexico offering cheaper labor in the USA causes problems. And all over Europe they're having different problems like that. But I believe that these problems could be reasonably resolved if the people who ran our world were fair and balanced leaders. But they're not. They're controlled. They have an agenda. It's the New Age, the New World Order, the Jewish Utopia. The Protocols of Zion details all this stuff. The report from Iron Mountain details all this stuff. This is number 131 in my series. I've got 100+ books that details the story. Go watch some more if you find this video insightful. You ain't seen nothing. I've made a lot of other videos. Bloody Zion. Jack Bernstein, the American Jew who moved to Israel, comes back to America, writes a book, and tells all. The Jew is like a beggar on the town who has no house. So they're really reaching for people's emotions in this story here. When he is driven from one house, he must perforce seek another. So I guess if anybody else is starving, they'll probably go do some strange things to get something to eat. Even beggars in our city streets. And I don't believe that this situation needs to exist. I just think that there are people who are in control, who are not trying to resolve problems. A lot of people are making a lot of money and into a lot of ugly things, including apparently satanic religions, Luciferic, Kabbalah, Satanism. One cannot legislate away prejudice or hatred. So it's just curious to me. I can't believe in every country all over the world, everybody else is just mean and nasty, because wherever the Jews went to, because they were leaving someplace else, that the people would eventually turn against them also. There's videos on YouTube, 92 different countries where the Jews were exiled, banned, or controlled. There's plenty of material out there. And there's a lot of good Jews out there who would be much nicer for me and a lot of other people if they would speak up instead of me, a Christian, having to speak up. I had better things to do back in 2005 when I discovered some of these things. I was in my vacation in Costa Rica on the Pacific Ocean, Jaco Beach. I was the only American sitting at the tiki bar. And the other people from Argentina, Germany, Norway, wherever, Canada, they said they felt sorry for we Americans because we didn't know what was going on in the world. They weren't talking about America very much. They just happened to mention it to me because they asked me, where are you from? Sitting there drinking a Presidente beer. So when I got back to Florida, I went to the bookstore, got on my computer, and started researching, and after about 2 weeks I got completely angry. I said, man, those guys were all right. They were telling me the truth. There's something bad going on. Something evil planned. Chemtrails, dumping chemicals in the sky. HAARP microwave transmitters. Bouncing pulses off the ionosphere, causing possibly earthquakes and other kinds of high beam weapons, probably involved in 911, according to Judy Wood. Remote viewing, MK Ultra, mind control, all kinds of weird stuff. If you go watch my videos, I've reported and investigated. It seems there's more to our reality than meets the eye. And that's an understatement. The haven of refuge idea must be abandoned. This is 1920, this book now. No nation ought to concentrate wholly on another nation. National justice, we all hear this word justice, demands that each nation should have its own land. That's funny how they've changed their tune now with this globalization and threats of sustainability, biodiversity, global warming, global cooling, ice ages, pole shifting, earthquakes, terrorism, plagues they're creating in black laboratories. Now they want the nation boundaries torn down all over the world except Israel. So we all can't be nationalists, but they can. 3 possible ways out. The conclusion is obvious. The Jews must either reconcile themselves to a present and future of calamity and disaster, or they must assimilate and disappear as a separate people. Or they must once again become a nation with a land of their own. So 3 possible ways out. They must just decide to live at the present and future with calamity and disaster. Number 1. Number 2, they must assimilate and disappear as a separate Jewish people. Number 2. Number 3, back in 1920, they must once again become a nation with a land of their own. So what choice do you think they selected? The first is inhumane, so they can't live under calamity and disaster. That would be inhumane. Even those Jews who believe that all the nationalism is in itself is evil, the cosmopolitans must grant that were such a loss of nationality individually possible or desirable, it could not come to pass for many generations. So if they wanted to assimilate, it wouldn't come about for many generations. Well, I hate to say it, but you go to Mexico or Brazil or America with American Indians, and even in India and China and other places around the world where people have mixed, they did assimilate. And sometimes they retain some of their identity, which is okay, like the American Indians and Mayans in Mexico and Ticans in Costa Rica. How many different peoples are in Panama, probably? London, right now. A big melting pot. So here they go, saying right here, they want the rest of us to become a big melting pot. Tear down any boundary lines. But they're all going back to Israel now, trying to get all the Jews back for some future event, the Jewish utopia, where they rule the world and microchip people and kill those who won't conform or go along. No thinking and feeling Jew can say, until that consummation, let the Jewish tragedy continue. Furthermore, why should the Jew accept and profess every nationality, any nationality, but his own? So the second is impossible. So they can't assimilate, and they don't want to continue putting up with the turmoil. The whole Jewish population cannot be absorbed. And as I read here, you're going to find out a lot of Jews did try to assimilate, but they met with a lot of ridicule and persecution by their own Jewish leaders and fellow men. So they weren't allowed to assimilate, generally speaking. A lot of them wanted to. A lot of them did. It assimilates by absorption of its outer fringes, like all other peoples, but it cannot and it will not disappear in bulk. It reproduces itself more rapidly than it loses in numbers by assimilation, as figures could easily show. Such a process, too, being slow, moral suicide, would be degrading beyond words. So they really don't want to assimilate with the rest of us. In the process, the Jews would indeed become merely a race, a people different but not distinctive, an anticlimax in character of their former selves, and a blot on their own historic history. Heroic history, not historic. Their own heroic history. I'm not so quite clear on why it's a heroic history. Apparently they were punished by God a couple times in history for going against God's commandments. But the Jews are saved from any such fate by their strong will to live and their sense of personal dignity. By a negative process, a process of elimination, we have reached the conclusion that the only hope for the Jew lies in a land of his own. But Zionism is not merely a balm of wounds, for wounds, or even merely a cure. It is an enhancement of life, a promise of achievement, To the world, the Jewish race is a race worth preserving. So again, which race are we talking about? Sephardic Hebrew, Ashkenazi, Northern European Khazarian, Poland, Ukraine, Russia. And the Jewish national idea is a noble and valuable idea. So you can see this material in the book here is really patting themselves on the back here. We're heroic and noble. But I don't think they're being too truthful in this material. But it is propaganda. Guide to Zionism. The strength and quality of the Jewish race are proved by three facts. Its endurance and increase through centuries of oppression and the persecution. So I keep saying this oppression and persecution has been going on for a couple thousand years. I had nothing to do with it. I'm only investigating this because I am aware, I became aware, 2005, we were all aware even earlier, 2001, that something wasn't right, 9/11. And then as I started digging and investigating, World War I, World War II, something's not right. The story's not right. And all the secret societies where they swear on a hand on a Bible, threat of death not to reveal the results. I didn't know all that was part of a secret doctrine. Helena Blavatsky, Alice Bailey, Annie Besant, Aleister Crowley, Albert Pike, Sabbatai Zevi in the Encyclopedia Judaica. I made videos on that. One of the rabbis who declared he was the Messiah in 1666. And he came up with some commandments that were opposite of the God's 10 Commandments. That you should steal. You should do adultery. You should murder. You should do all those things. Like Aleister Crowley said, do as thou wilt. Watch that video, series 23 that I made. Oh my God. It's large numbers and individuals of high achievements in all departments of life in spite of the numberless obstacles and handicapped. And lastly, the high standard of social morality in its communities. No sign of permanent physical race deteriorations have appeared. Well, again, this book is not being honest. I am aware that deals were made, even with Iraq, the leadership. Anti-Semitic attitudes were encouraged. Situations were created to get the Jews to feel uncomfortable, to rile up the people, to attack the Jews. These were the tools they used to get them to move to Israel. Even paying them $10,000, $20,000 a head. It's called a program called Aliyah. I've showed the pictures. We'll look at a couple pictures again. But back in the 20s and 30s, everything I've been reading is true. Now, what's going on now? People from all over the world. This is no small thing. It's taking place today. Things will probably get worse in the world to continue to bring about this Jewish utopia. Large ceremonies. Political figures up there talking. The diaspora, the Jews dispersed all over the world. During World War I, World War II, there was a plan in play. I've been reading about it here. Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, he's greeting some of the new arrivals. That's the guy who said, don't worry about the USA, we control the USA. And he was in a coma shortly thereafter. They didn't want him to have to explain that. Yep, Mr. Sharon was greeting the people when they arrived. Advertisements, the joy of Aliyah. They've even got commercials of these girls, young girls, meeting men, their future husband. The joy of Aliyah. This is a religious thing. Make no mistake about it. They're breaking down in tears. We're finally home. Thousands of years of persecution, oppression, no matter where we went. People bring in their babies. Israel, a journey through time. Aliyah, rebirth of a nation. You think the Palestinian people have a chance? You think Assad, president of Syria, has a chance? You think Iran has a chance? Remember the Robert Williams, the American intelligence officer, finding that book, The Jewish Utopia. Do you think the world has a chance? They even have special planes, apparently. Right on the plane it says, Aliyah, Aliyah, Aliyah. Plane loads of people. So the rest of the world is on the brink. But in Israel, the joy of Aliyah. People from Russia, from Poland, from the Ukraine, from all over the world, from Argentina. Anti-sentiments were instigated, encouraged, so people would be motivated. Unbelievable story, but true. And I keep mentioning all this conspiracies, secret societies, people involved with the symbols, the star, the six-pointed star. The pictures are all here, and on Yahoo image site, look up Zionism or Aliyah and all these things. You'll see these pictures in a link, and it'll tell you the details. They have our presidents under control. A lot of Jews don't want Zionism. It's represented by a snake, a serpent. Are there some of these people that are into Satanism? And in the Bible, it was a serpent who tempted Adam and Eve. It's a serpent. I made that one, the Holy Serpent of the Jews. I'm looking at my bookcase. Series number 91 by Text Mars. He was having a lecture. At the end of the lecture, one Jewish man walked up and said, "Sir, I am offended." And Text Mars says, "I don't understand why you're offended. Aren't we all the children of Adam and Eve?" And according to Text Mars, not me, the guy says, "No, we are from the seed of the serpent." It boggles the mind. But apparently, something's coming in our future. A lot of people are involved, a lot of magazines, a lot of our leaders, church leaders. Look at the star on this guy. A lot of our politicians, you can go look this stuff up, all these guys' names. This TV news guys, CEOs, and a lot of Jews reject Zionism. These are Jews here. They reject Zionism. Look at the banner they're holding. They don't want this. Even in the United States, everybody doesn't assimilate. We got Protestants, Baptists, atheists. We even have witchcraft organizations. Hindu. I mean, how many people in North Carolina, everywhere you go, there are people from India or China, and Vietnam, and Thailand. Some of my best friends. They don't have to become White Rick. They can stay Thai from Thailand or Vietnamese. Their family values, what they do. Nobody's forcing them to change. Generally, eventually, we all speak English. But anyways, this has been going on a long time, and actually it involves, as you can see here, Jesus and a serpent. The new United States of Zionism. Apparently these people were involved in 9/11. You can look up Webster Tarpley's book, 9/11 Synthetic Terror, and so much more material, videos on YouTube. It's becoming common knowledge. It just amazes me more people aren't in an uproar. So it looks like you got the Zionist Israeli police fighting with some Jewish people who do not agree with Zionism. And this is one of the symbols, the 7 candlestick. It goes way back in the Bible. But it says here, this is what they intend to do to us on this particular picture. Colonize, terrorize, nationalize, militarize, radicalize, intimidate, and censure. So they don't want people speaking up. They want to censor what we say. More Jews fighting Zionism. So yeah, I'm taking the side of the Jewish people who are opposed to this thing. So let me read some more of this Guide to Zionism. Continuing on, it is hard to evaluate the national idea of a people without a land and without a state. The prophetic or missionary character of the Jewish people, implied by the word chosen, recognized in all ages, has been variously interpreted. So now in this book, A Guide to Zionism, they're bringing up the word chosen. To the Christian, this quality culminating in Jesus, their Christ. Remember, the Jews back then rejected Jesus and had him crucified. Who, according to them, gave to the Christian world the divine inheritance cut off from a sinful Israel. So why were the Jews dispersed from Jerusalem, Israel? To a certain minority among the Jews, the word chosen means a literal and individual superiority of the Jews, whose mission it is, scattered among the nations, to enhance the morality of their Gentile neighbors. So the Jews want to enhance our morality. But I went over that material in the To Eliminate the Opaque book here, where they were the ones back in 1977 and 1994 trying to get homosexuality and other decadent activities accepted by the people. So they weren't enhancing morality. So like I say, when you read this stuff, you got to pay attention. Of their Gentile neighbors, so they do call us something different. So 98% of the world, the rest of us people, are having the 2% or less of the Jewish people going to enhance our morality, while they've taken over our politicians and governments, and there's so much evil going on. I don't think you can call that enhancing the morality of the Gentile neighbors. Such a view is not only rightfully resented by their quite normal and quite moral Gentile neighbors, but it is disgusting to the modest and sensible Jew himself. It says here, the Jews claim no individual superiority. That's what it says here. nor do the exaltations of Moses and the later prophets, religious now, point to the fact that as a mass of individuals, they could ever all claim such surpassing virtue. Remember when Moses came down from the mountain to get the 2 tablets from God, 10 Commandments? He found the Jews had collected all the gold amongst themselves, a bunch of Jews, had built a golden calf, and were having a satanic ritual, drunken orgy, worshiping the golden calf. Moses was so upset, he smashed the tablets. He had to go back up to the mountain after punishing the Jews to get 2 more tablets, and I think that took him 40 days and 40 nights. FYI, so the story goes. It is true that Jesus transmitted to the Gentile world the Jewish code of personal morals. One of the commandments I read in the Gospel of St. John, Jesus says, you are to love one another. That's a commandment. He used the word commandment. This has now been thoroughly assimilated by the Christian world. But the Jews are not abiding by the 10 Commandments. Nor have the Jews anything to give or gain by a claim of priority to priority or a dog wagger's tasty demand for gratitude. I like some of this writing here. He's saying that they don't want to be like a dog wagger. Tasty demand for gratitude. To the traditional Jew, the meaning of chosen is quite different. It was the nation that was chosen for a national task, not the individual Jew. To justify this choice, the nation must suffer and labor and be severely punished and be lashed into obedience. Read the Protocols of Zion. They plan on punishing us and lashing we the people worldwide into obedience, the ones that are allowed to live. According to the Jewish Utopia and the Protocols of Zion, and I'm sure other books, God manifests his justice through human history, the history of nations. National and international morality is the particular and still untried and unfulfilled idea of Jewish teaching. All the nations shall walk in the way of the Lord. The Jewish people is a chosen people, not a chosen mass of individuals. So wait a minute. I'm going to show you what I did here. I read the top sentence, and then I read further on down, and it was contradictory. You can see my notes on the side. So I'm going to go back to the top and read that sentence. The Jews claim no individual superiority. That's what it says. So I'm reading further on. The Jewish people is a chosen people. But up above it says they claim no individual superiority. But down below, the Jewish people is a chosen people, not a chosen mass of individuals. Palestine is a holy land. That means the land where the Jewish people is to work out its destiny. So there is a destiny here. Imperialism is precluded. One land for one people. If the Jewish people chosen for this task of national regeneration proves itself unworthy, so they have to prove themselves worthy, it is to forfeit the land. So I guess they got to fight pretty hard to not be deemed unworthy. Unless you are a righteous people, says the Lord, you cannot keep the land I lend to you on this condition. How different from the principle that necessity knows no law, and that the welfare of the nation is the supreme and only moral criteria of the individual action. The Jews today believe and repeat in their prayers, I'll read that again. The Jews today believe and repeat in their prayers that they were banished from their land because they were unworthy. So they say this in their prayers. They also believe and repeat that their exile is a punishment and a discipline, and that they are at least to return to Jerusalem with singing and to Zion with everlasting joy. Well, that's pretty powerful thinking. To run around spending your life generation after generation praying, saying you're unworthy, and believing you're being punished and disciplined, but eventually you're going to return singing with everlasting joy. Wow. Then will all the nations accept the yoke of the Lord. So they're going to represent the Lord, and we all have to accept the yoke. You know what the yoke is? They put it around your neck, control you, like cattle. And walk in his ways. So whose ways? God, Jesus, Lucifer, Satan? Which one? Satan, must be getting tired of speaking. Jesus was rejected. They're into the Kabbalah, and I've been reading the books and Morals and Dogma of the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, all these other books seem like Kabbalistic material, secret doctrines. And the deity is Lucifer, Satan. The symbols we see everywhere, the serpent. The shows on Emmys and Grammys and football halftime shows. Grand openings for tunnels and CERN even, the collider, the celebrations. The Shiva, goddess of destruction on the Empire State Building. Downtown city monuments all over the country, obelisk, Isis, Osiris. On the US $1 bill, the all-seeing eye, the pyramid. So who are the secret societies, the communists, the Zionists, witchcraft, and all these other organizations? Who is their deity? Is it opposite of God and Jesus and the Holy Ghost? Such is the poetry and romance of Jewish ideas. Practically, it expresses itself in laws and social righteousness, and in the ideal of law itself. The Jewish people have from the first stood for the idea of democracy, both international and intranational. So let's talk about democracy. I believe democracy would work out well if all the participants, we the people, were knowledgeable and weren't being deceived, misled. But when certain peoples, they say the Jewish people, which are the Illuminati, Zionists, communists, etc., banksters, not to be confused with Jews who I showed you the pictures that are fighting this Zionist program, that control the newspapers, TV programming, Hollywood, magazines, education in schools, higher level colleges, universities. They're feeding us, the people, what they want the people to believe. We are being deceived and beguiled. Deceived. All right. I do about 20 more minutes. Continuing reading in the Guide to Zionism, published in 1920. The stuff they were thinking. As a theory of individual morality, democracy was passed on to Christianity, which is a personal religion. So they're calling Christianity a personal religion. As a theory of national and international morality, it is still untried. It is the idea to be worked out by the Jewish people in the Jewish nation. Scattered individuals cannot fulfill a national idea. And it is an idea so noble that it advocates ought to at least be given a chance to fulfill it. Democratic idea of Zionism. This idea will be attained, may be inferred from the facts of the Jewish history and the persistence of the Jewish people. The movement is based on the prophetic prophets and democratic character of Jewish thought. Well, if you read Jewish Utopia, Protocols of Zion, and lots of other things, there's nothing democratic about the way they think about the Gentiles. They also call Goy and Goyim, which means cattle. In the Zionist movement, democracy is complete. Equal suffrage, equal suffrage, and equal representation for man and woman, poor and rich, are the basic principles in the organization. Sounds like communist propaganda. In the continued self-criticism and ferment that is in prophetic days still expressed themselves in opposition parties, seems to ensure at least the preservation and possibly the complete fulfillment of the prophetic ideas in the regenerated land of Israel. Are you getting the point here? Is there a plan? Now you know why they had to do World War I and World War II and 9/11 and all those other wars. Countries overthrown, presidents assassinated. When they took over the United States money supply in 1913, they've managed to crash the system. Remember, they took it over. They were in control of the money supply. When they brought about economic hardship, they did it on purpose. They gained huge amounts of money every time they did it. Look at 2008. Too big to fail. What kind of line is that? They control our politicians. It was their Federal Reserve. They got our government to borrow their money to give back to them. The American people holding the bag. Palestine in Jewish thought. By the mass of the Jews, those biblical ideas have never been intellectualized. They are transmuted into habit and emotions. The character of the people, the habits of democratic organization, and the lawfulness and the religious love of Palestine. This passion for the Holy Land, an inarticulate, unreasoning passion, has expressed itself so far in pilgrimages and individualistic migrations. It's all organized. They're not being so truthful in this book. Many causes have combined until recently to prevent a national movement. Remember, this is 1920. In such a movement, the love of the Jewish people for Palestine and the place of Palestine in their religion and history make it the only spot on earth that could draw to itself the masses of Jewish people. Again, what about the bulk of the Jewish people right now, which are not Hebrew, Ashkenazi? Why did they have a passion? Zionism, expression of Jewish people. The Zionist movement, which was officially and politically organized in 1897, might be called the articulate and self-conscious agent of the Jewish people. This gives it its representative character, although its organized membership may form a minority among the Jews. The Zionist Congress, with its many delegates from every civilized country, has been the Jewish Congress. So the Zionist Congress is the Jewish Congress. So it says here. For inertia cannot be represented and constitute no opposition by its failure to be represented. Could the Zionist sympathizers be counted, that they would surely be found to constitute the bulk of the Jewish people? hundreds of years of oppression, have left the stamp of timidity upon the national will. But there is. The Zionist movement is a folk movement, a representative movement, as is provided by the fact of its rapid growth among all classes and in all lands, and by the other fact that most of the money which actually supported the practical work in Palestine until recently came from Jews who were not directly affiliated with the Zionist movement. I think I'm getting tired of speaking. A few more minutes to go. The Zionists are the agents of the Jewish people in the regeneration of Palestine. The Zionists and their Jewish co-workers have proved themselves fit to be the agents of Jewish people. Against enormous odds, without the help of anything on earth except their own resolution and courage, with opposition from some governments, and with concrete help or encouragement from almost none, at the cost of many lives, and the consecration of many more lives at any cost, they have built in Palestine the normal, wholesome, and flourishing life of Jewish agricultural villages where the Hebrew language and the Jewish institutions blossom with the soil. I don't seem to think that they're mentioning the Jewish-oriented secret societies, the Freemasons wanting to assist in rebuilding King Solomon's temple, and all those organizations that teach the Kabbalistic material, and the Kabbalah is the part of the culture of historic Jewry. So they're not being truthful here. They have troubled, tripled, Palestinian trade in less than 20 years. They have reclaimed death-dealing swamps and arid deserts for the purpose of agriculture. So this is in 1920, way before there was a state of Israel. So you could see World War II was necessary, because apparently Britain backed out of its commitment to help annex the Palestinians' land. So they needed World War II, which involved Turkey and the controlling forces in the Middle East lose all their power. And these people were top advisors to the United States President and Britain government all over the world. So the real controllers of World War I and World War II seem to have kept their identity secret. They were returning to its normal uses. I am getting tired of speaking. They were returning to its normal uses and fertility, a land devastated by war and neglect, but whose topology and climate are comparable only with those of California. All this had come to pass unnoticed by the busy world until the crisis of war, when the special tragedy created in an always tragic land drew the attention of the practical philanthropist to a social organization that went far to meet the need for philanthropy. The Zionist Bank met the money crisis in Palestine and eased the situation for Jew and Gentile alike. It issued paper notes that for a while were the only accepted media of exchange. So with that said, I think I'll stop reading right now. I'm going to do more on this book. It talks about the Balfour Agreement on the next page. And a speech by Churchill and a speech by President Woodrow Wilson of the United States, all supporting the Balfour Agreement. So there was definitely a lot going on. And we can see why they did 9/11. And the game is not over. They do plan on completing the New Age and the New World Order. It does seem to be anti-Jesus, anti-Christian. And according to all the symbols and everything, it seems to be pro-Satanic and pro-Luciferian. Isis, Osiris, Ra, all these even channeled entities from ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic text. So it seems to be involving the invisible reality. So what is going on? Thank you for watching my video, Rick Mariko reporting.